She kissed her children goodnight. She told her neighbors she'd be back by Sunday. She never came back. Everyone, her family, the police, her entire town assumed the worst, that she was gone, that whoever took her had won. But the truth was something no one, not even the detectives who'd seen it all, could have prepared for. She vanished without a trace. The truth was more terrifying than anyone imagined. Stay with me, because by the time this story is over, you will never look at someone you trust the same way again. And before we go any further, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. There is a particular kind of town in America that looks exactly like safety. Tree-lined streets, school buses that run on time, neighbors who wave from their driveways, weekend farmers markets and soccer fields and church parking lots that fill up every Sunday morning. These are the towns we dream about raising children in. The towns we think of when we say the word home. New Canaan, Connecticut was exactly that kind of town. And on a Friday morning in May 2019, it became the setting for one of the most disturbing, most heartbreaking disappearances this country had seen in years. A woman dropped her 5 children at their school, drove back to her house, and was never seen again. No goodbye, no note, no warning. She was simply gone, and the more investigators looked, the more they realized that the person everyone assumed had loved her most was the person they needed to fear the most. This is the story of Jennifer Calloway, a mother, a writer, a woman who had seen the danger coming and told people, a woman who had documented her fear in black and white, a woman whose warnings were on paper, whose pleas were in court files, and who still could not be saved. Ask yourself this as we go through this story together. How many people knew something was wrong? How many people saw the signs? And why did it take losing her completely before anyone truly listened? Jennifer Calloway was 50 years old when she disappeared. She had grown up in New York City, the daughter of a wealthy, educated family who valued books and art and the life of the mind. She had attended an Ivy League university, graduated with honors, and by her late 20s had carved out a small but genuine place in New York's literary world, she wrote. Not casually, not as a hobby, she wrote with a kind of discipline and intention that told everyone around her she believed she had something to say. She had finished a novel by the time she was 30. She had a circle of friends who remembered her as sharp, funny, deeply loyal, and quietly fierce. She was, by every account, a woman on the way to becoming exactly who she had always intended to be. And then she met Marcus Calloway. Marcus was everything Jennifer had not grown up around. He was Greek-born, educated in the United States, physically imposing, and enormously self-assured. He moved through rooms like a man who expected to be noticed, and he was. He was in real estate development, building luxury custom homes across the New England corridor, and for a time, business was very good. He and Jennifer married in 2004. They settled in Fairfield County, Connecticut, in a sprawling 6-bedroom house that Marcus had designed himself. Over the next decade, they had 5 children. Jennifer put down her manuscript. She set aside the literary career she had been building. She became a mother, a homemaker, a presence at school events and soccer games and birthday parties. People who knew her said she was wonderful at all of it, devoted, present, the kind of mother who remembered every teacher's name and every friend's birthday. But people who knew her well, truly well, said something else too. They said that behind the beautiful house and the beautiful children and the beautiful life, something had gone very wrong. The nanny, a woman named Lauren, who worked for the Calloway family for years and would later testify at trial, described a household that operated under a particular kind of tension. Marcus, she said, was controlling. Not always in obvious ways, not always in ways that would have triggered alarm bells for a stranger walking through, but in the ways that matter. He monitored Jennifer's movements. He questioned where she had been and who she had spoken to. He made decisions for the family unilaterally and expected compliance. And when Jennifer pushed back, when she asserted herself or disagreed or simply expressed an opinion he had not approved, the atmosphere in that house would shift in ways that made Lauren deeply uncomfortable. Jennifer lost weight over those years. Her anxiety, Lauren said, became something visible. Something you could see in the way she held herself, the way she scanned a room when she entered it, the way she always seemed to be calculating distance. In 2017, Jennifer Calloway filed for divorce. And if you want to understand everything that followed, every lie, every manipulation, every desperate act that would culminate in her disappearance, you need to understand what that decision cost her. Because Jennifer did not file for divorce lightly. She filed knowing it would enrage Marcus. She wrote those words herself in a court document. "I know that filing for divorce will enrage him," she wrote that. She submitted it to a judge. She was telling the system on paper, in legal language, that she was afraid of her own husband, and the system, to its eternal shame, did not protect her the way she needed to be protected. The divorce proceedings stretched on for 2 brutal years. There were custody battles over the 5 children. There were financial disputes. Marcus, whose real estate business had begun to struggle, hemorrhaging money in ways that would only become clear later, fought the divorce with a ferocity that alarmed Jennifer's attorneys. He hired and fired lawyers repeatedly. He filed motions and counter-motions. He accused Jennifer of trying to move the children to New York to be near her mother. He threatened, through intermediaries, to take the children to Greece and never come back. Lauren, the nanny, testified that after Jennifer discovered Marcus was having an affair with a woman named Carla, a former television personality who had become his live-in girlfriend, the situation at home became frightening. One afternoon, Lauren was playing with the youngest child when Jennifer came running into the bedroom, closed the door, and pressed herself against it. Marcus was outside, pushing the door open, shouting. Lauren said Jennifer's face in that moment was the face of someone who was genuinely terrified. Not upset, not angry, terrified. Jennifer had begun quietly preparing to leave. She had asked Lauren to help move certain things out of the house. Small things Marcus would not notice missing. She hired a bodyguard, a private security consultant, to escort her to certain meetings and appointments. She was not being paranoid. She was being careful. And there is a difference, a devastating difference, between paranoia and a woman who has correctly identified the threat and is doing everything in her power to survive it. The affair with Carla had been going on for the better part of a year before Jennifer discovered it. Carla was younger, polished, and by every account completely aware that Marcus was a married man with 5 children. She had been introduced to the children at a water ski club, presented to them casually as a friend of their father's. The children called her by a nickname. They hugged her. They already knew her well before Jennifer knew she existed at all. When Jennifer found out, something shifted permanently in the trajectory of that marriage. Not just because of the betrayal, though the betrayal was real and it was deep, but because of what the affair revealed about Marcus's character. The lying, the compartmentalization, the ease with which he had maintained 2 separate lives simultaneously. Jennifer told her friends, "This is who he has always been. I just didn't have proof until now." Friday, May 24th, 2019. Memorial Day weekend. The kind of late spring morning that makes Connecticut feel like a postcard. The trees were fully green. The air was warm but not yet humid. It was the last day of school before a long holiday weekend, and the Calloway children, 5 of them, ranging in age from 8 to 14, were dressed, backpacked, and loaded into Jennifer's car by 8 in the morning. Lauren, the nanny, helped get them settled. Jennifer dropped the children at their private school just after 8:15. She waved to another parent in the parking lot. She drove away. That was the last time Jennifer Calloway was seen alive. She never came home. Or rather, she came home to something that was waiting for her there. Because what investigators would later reconstruct painstakingly, frame by frame from surveillance footage gathered from residential cameras, police systems, and even a passing school bus, was that Marcus Calloway had spent the morning of May 24th executing a plan. A plan that had not been formed in rage or impulse, but in calculation. He had borrowed a work truck belonging to one of his employees without asking permission. A battered old pickup that no one would connect to him at a glance. Surveillance cameras captured that truck parked on a road near Jennifer's rented house at 7:57 in the morning, while Jennifer was still at the school. He was already there. He was already waiting. He was already inside the house, or at the house, before Jennifer returned from dropping off their children. What happened inside that garage in the minutes after Jennifer came home is something the world will never fully know, because Jennifer is not here to tell it. But the evidence told its own story, and it told it loudly. When police entered Jennifer's home later that afternoon, they found blood on the garage floor. Blood in the car. Blood that told investigators that Jennifer had been harmed severely, and that someone had then attempted, frantically, desperately, to clean it up. The attempt had failed. The blood remained. And blood, as any investigator will tell you, does not lie. It persists. It speaks. And what it said in Jennifer Calloway's garage on May 24th, 2019 was damning beyond any reasonable doubt. Lauren, the nanny, was the first to sound the alarm. By mid-afternoon, she had not heard from Jennifer. Jennifer always checked in. She was that kind of mother, the kind who texted when she arrived somewhere, who called when plans changed, who was present and reachable and accountable in the ordinary, daily way that people who love their children are. When hours passed without a word, Lauren called Jennifer's phone. No answer. She called again. Nothing. By early evening, Lauren had contacted Jennifer's friends. By 7 o'clock that night, a missing persons report had been filed with the New Canaan Police Department. The children had already been whisked by Lauren to New York, to the apartment of Jennifer's elderly mother, Gloria. Lauren made that call instinctively, almost protectively, before anyone had told her to. She would later say she simply knew, in that wordless, gut-level way that women sometimes know things, that something had happened to Jennifer, that the children needed to be somewhere safe, that the man they would first have called was not the man they could call. Marcus Calloway, meanwhile, gave his first statement to police calmly. He said he had not seen Jennifer that day. He said they had been living separately for 2 years and had minimal contact. He expressed what investigators later described as a conspicuous lack of distress for a man whose wife had just been reported missing. He answered questions politely, cooperatively, and with a composure that Detective Ray Santos, a 15-year veteran who had worked dozens of missing persons cases, said immediately struck him as wrong. When a spouse or partner goes missing, Detective Santos would later explain, even in cases of a bitter divorce, there is usually some baseline human reaction. Fear, confusion, urgency, something. What I saw from Marcus Calloway in that first conversation was someone who was managing the interaction, like he had already rehearsed it. Santos filed that observation away. He did not yet know what to do with it, but he did not forget it. The day after Jennifer vanished, police were already treating the case as something more serious than a voluntary disappearance. The blood in the garage made that determination for them. But publicly, they said nothing. They asked for the community's help locating Jennifer. They put out an alert, and New Canaan, that quiet, safe, tree-lined town, began to fracture under the weight of what it did not yet know but already sensed. Neighbors gathered on sidewalks and spoke in low voices. Parents at the school said very little in front of their children, and then said everything when the children were in bed. A woman was gone, a mother of 5, and the town that had always felt like safety suddenly felt like something else entirely. In the days that followed, investigators worked around the clock. They pulled surveillance footage from cameras across a 14-mile radius. They subpoenaed phone records. They interviewed neighbors, colleagues, the children's teachers, the parents of the children's friends, Marcus's employees, Marcus's lawyers, and Marcus himself again and again and again. And with each conversation, with each piece of footage, with each record and receipt and cell tower ping, the picture that emerged was not of a woman who had run away. It was of a woman who had been taken, meticulously, deliberately, by someone who had thought about it for a very long time. The surveillance footage was the cornerstone of the case. Investigators from the Connecticut State Police Major Crime Unit spent weeks reviewing it. 12 hours of footage just to reconstruct the movement on a single day. They found the borrowed work truck. They found Marcus, captured on camera, at multiple locations throughout the afternoon and evening of May 24th, distances away from his home in Farmington. And what he was doing at those locations, what investigators found him on camera doing, in the streetlights of Hartford's North End, was the detail that turned public sympathy against Marcus Calloway overnight and never gave it back. He was disposing of evidence, bag after bag after bag stuffed into public trash receptacles over a stretch of several miles. Investigators recovered those bags before the garbage trucks came. Inside them, zip ties, latex gloves, duct tape, pieces of clothing. Items stained with blood that DNA analysis would confirm was Jennifer's. And in the warrant that detailed those findings, investigators wrote something that has stayed with this case ever since. It appeared the zip ties had been used to secure and incapacitate Jennifer Calloway for some period of time, and that she had been alive when that occurred. Alive, restrained, in her own garage, by the father of her children. The man who had stood beside her at an altar 15 years earlier and made a promise in front of God and family and friends. That man. Marcus Calloway was arrested on June 1st, 2019, 8 days after Jennifer disappeared. He and Carla were both taken into custody. Carla charged with conspiracy and evidence tampering, Marcus charged with murder. Both pleaded not guilty. Both were released on bond, Marcus on $6 million, Carla on $2 million. The town of New Canaan watched them walk out of custody and back into the world, and the town of New Canaan went quiet with a grief that had no clean edges. The search for Jennifer Calloway's body began immediately and never truly ended. Law enforcement searched parks, reservoirs, wooded areas, construction sites associated with Marcus's business, and properties belonging to anyone with a connection to the case. They brought in cadaver dogs. They searched from the air. They searched in winter when the trees were bare and the ground was frozen and visibility in the woods was as clear as it would ever be. They found nothing. Jennifer Calloway was gone, not just missing, but gone in a way that told investigators she had been disposed of with the same cold deliberation that had characterized every other aspect of what Marcus had done. The absence of her body became its own kind of statement. It said he planned this far in advance. He had thought about what would happen after. The media coverage was immediate and immense. Jennifer's story spread from Connecticut to national news within 72 hours. Her photograph, a warm, dark-haired woman with intelligent eyes and a wide smile, was everywhere. Television networks ran segments, newspapers ran features. True crime podcasts dedicated episodes to her within the week. And the internet, as the internet does, divided itself into factions. There were those who looked at the blood, the zip ties, the surveillance footage, and reached the only conclusion the evidence supported. And there were those, fewer but loud, who speculated about Jennifer herself, who suggested with breathtaking cruelty that a woman going through a messy divorce might have reasons to stage her own disappearance, who noted that she had written a novel and tried to connect that fact to some elaborate fiction she might have constructed in real life. Jennifer's family and friends watched that speculation with a grief compounded by fury. Her closest friend, a woman named Dana, gave a single press statement early in the investigation and then went silent. Not because she had nothing to say, but because she had too much. Jennifer told people, Dana said. She filed papers, she wrote it down. She said she was afraid of him. She said it to a judge. What else was she supposed to do? That question, what else was she supposed to do, became the moral center of the case. Not just for Jennifer's circle, but for the thousands and thousands of women across the country who followed her story because they recognized something in it. Not the wealth, not the Connecticut setting, not the 5 children, but the specific experience of knowing you are in danger and finding that the systems designed to protect you are moving too slowly to keep pace with the threat. Marcus's defense team was aggressive from the beginning. His attorney released statements, gave press interviews, and attempted to reshape the narrative at every turn. At one point, the attorney suggested publicly that Jennifer's disappearance might be connected to a book she had written, an absurd claim that was quickly and thoroughly refuted by everyone who had read the manuscript, which predated her relationship with Marcus by years. At another point, the attorney floated the idea of a revenge suicide, that Jennifer had staged her own death to destroy Marcus. Jennifer's family did not dignify that suggestion with a response. Dana said only this: Jennifer would never have left her children, not for 1 hour, not for any reason on earth. That is who she was. Meanwhile, investigators turned their attention increasingly to Carla. Her role in the case was complicated and, in many ways, more disturbing than the simple narrative of a jealous girlfriend. Phone records and text messages recovered during the investigation revealed a pattern of communication between Marcus and Carla in the weeks and months before Jennifer disappeared. A pattern that showed not just awareness, but active discussion of what Marcus intended to do. Prosecutors would later argue in court that Carla had not merely known about the plan. She had helped shape it, that she had reinforced Marcus's worst impulses, validated his rage, and in specific documented exchanges, had encouraged him toward a conclusion that any reasonable person would have known was catastrophic. Her text messages used the language of inevitability, the language of permission, the language of a person telling another person, "You have no other choice." There was a moment, documented in court filings and later reported extensively, when Carla had been in contact with a mutual acquaintance in another country, coordinating an alibi of sorts for Marcus through a planned phone call that would establish his whereabouts. It was a small detail, almost bureaucratic in its coldness, but it told investigators something important. Carla had not panicked after Jennifer disappeared. She had not distanced herself from Marcus out of horror or guilt. She had continued, methodically, to help manage the fallout. That is not the behavior of an innocent bystander who was swept along by someone else's violence. That is the behavior of a participant. The case also produced a third suspect, Marcus's attorney in a separate civil matter, a man named David Holt. Holt was charged with conspiracy to commit murder based on evidence that he had been looped into conversations about the plan. His own personal history was relevant. He had been accused of serious misconduct in his marriage. A shallow grave had been found on a property he owned, though no body was ever recovered from it. Holt pleaded not guilty and maintained his innocence. His case moved slowly through the courts, delayed by pandemic shutdowns and procedural motions, and the sheer complexity of a case with multiple defendants. He was the quiet corner of a very loud tragedy, a reminder that the network of people willing to look away from evil, or worse, to help facilitate it, is almost always larger than we want to believe. Here is where the story of Jennifer Calloway becomes something that will stay with you. Because Marcus Calloway never went to trial. He was charged with murder in January 2020. He was placed under house arrest. He wore a monitoring ankle bracelet. He posted his $6 million bond and went home to his house in Farmington, the house that Jennifer had shared with him, the house where their children had grown up, and he waited. And then, on a January morning in 2020, just as he was scheduled to appear in court, Marcus Calloway attempted to take his own life. He was found at his home with carbon monoxide poisoning. He was rushed to a hospital. He lingered for 2 days. On January 30th, 2020, Marcus Calloway was pronounced dead. He left a note. The note, which his attorney later released publicly, declared his innocence. It said he refused to spend another hour in custody for something he did not do. It named Carla and insisted she was innocent as well. It was the last act of a man who had, from the very beginning, been unwilling to be held accountable for anything. The note was not believed by investigators. It was not believed by Jennifer's family. It was not believed by the people who had spent months building a case against him. A note is not evidence. A note is not a verdict. And a man who lies to police 8 times in 4 months, whose car is on camera, whose DNA is on the zip ties, whose employee's truck is on footage, does not get to declare his innocence in a note and have the world accept it. But here is the cruelest part. Because Marcus died before trial, there was no verdict. There was no courtroom moment where the evidence was laid out in front of 12 citizens and judged. There was no conviction. There was no sentence. Marcus Calloway escaped the legal reckoning that every piece of evidence said he deserved. Jennifer's family had to absorb that reality, the reality of a man who had been charged with murdering their daughter, their sister, their friend, and who had then removed himself from the process entirely and find a way to keep living. But Carla's case continued, and Carla's trial became the venue where much of what had happened was finally said out loud, in a courtroom, on the record. The trial lasted 7 weeks. Prosecutors had no eyewitnesses to Jennifer's death. What they had instead was surveillance footage from cameras across the state, stitched together into a 14-hour timeline of Marcus's movements on May 24th. They had text messages, hundreds of them, that documented Carla's involvement in the planning and the aftermath. They had phone records. They had the testimony of the nanny, Lauren, who sat in that witness box and told the jury everything she had seen and heard and feared over the years she had spent in that household. And they had Jennifer's own words, the words she had written in court filings, the words she had spoken to her therapist, the words she had texted to her closest friends. Words that, read aloud in a courtroom, formed the most devastating portrait of a woman who had been shouting for help in every register available to her. The jury deliberated for 2 full days. On March 1st, 2024, nearly 5 years after Jennifer disappeared, they returned a verdict of guilty. Guilty of conspiracy to commit murder. Guilty of evidence tampering. Guilty of hindering prosecution. Carla sat at the defense table as the verdict was read, and when the last count was announced, she put her head down on the table. She was sentenced to 50 years in prison. She will be in her 90s before she is eligible for release. At the sentencing, Jennifer's children, now teenagers and young adults, stood one by one and delivered victim impact statements directly to the woman who had conspired in the destruction of their family. One of Jennifer's sons looked Carla in the eye and said he would never forgive her. Not because forgiveness would not have been possible eventually, but because Carla had never once expressed genuine remorse. She had maintained her innocence through trial. She had watched her legal team attack Jennifer's character, suggest Jennifer had invented her own disappearance, imply that a murdered woman was the author of her own death. And Carla had sat through all of that without flinching. Jennifer's son said the words that needed to be said. I will never forgive you. And then he sat down, and it was over, and it was not over at all. Jennifer Calloway's body has never been found. As of today, her children are growing up without their mother. They are being raised by Jennifer's mother, Gloria, a woman in her late 80s who has outlived her daughter and who spends her remaining years ensuring that 5 grandchildren know who Their mother was what she valued, what she wrote, what she laughed at, what she loved. Jennifer's novel, the one she had been working on, before the marriage, before the children, before Marcus, has never been published. But the people who read it in manuscript said it was good. Really good. The kind of good that makes you angry about everything that came after. The kind of good that makes you think, this is what was taken. A voice, a mind. A future that had already proven it was worth having. There is a court document in the public record of Jennifer Calloway's case, a filing she submitted herself during the divorce proceedings in which she wrote, "I know that filing for divorce and filing this motion will enrage him. But I have no choice. My children need to be safe, and I need to be safe, and the truth is that I am afraid." She wrote that. It is on paper. It is part of the official record. A judge read it. Attorneys read it. The system received that message, processed it, and continued moving at the speed of a legal calendar, while Jennifer Calloway moved at the speed of a woman running out of time. There is no way to read that document today and not feel the full weight of what was lost. Not just Jennifer, though Jennifer is everything, but the promise we make as a society that the law will protect the people who come to it for help. That promise failed Jennifer Calloway. It failed her in specific, documented, traceable ways. And until we are honest about that failure, until we stop treating protective orders and court filings and the written words of frightened women as formalities rather than emergencies, we will keep failing the Jennifers who come after her. The children who bore the brunt of all of this, 5 young people who lost their mother to violence and their father to accountability, are not statistics. They are real. They are growing up. They are, by all accounts, being raised with love and with the presence of Jennifer in their daily lives. Her memory is tended carefully. Her photographs are on walls. Her stories are told at dinner tables. Her laugh is described and redescribed so often that the youngest children, who were barely old enough to hold her image clearly in memory, now hold it anyway because the people around them have refused to let it fade. That is what love does when everything else fails. It refuses to let the person disappear twice. So here is what I want you to think about as this video ends. Jennifer Calloway was not a woman who was silent. She was not a woman who didn't ask for help, who kept her fear to herself, who gave no warning signs. She screamed, legally, in writing, into every system available to her. She documented, she filed, she hired protection, she made plans, she did everything right, and she still didn't make it out. What does that tell us about the systems we trust to keep people safe? What does it tell us about the distance between a woman writing "I'm afraid" in a court document, and the moment someone in authority treats that sentence with the urgency it deserves? I don't want to leave you feeling hopeless, because this story is not just about what was lost. It is about what was seen and said and fought for, and ultimately, in part, answered. Carla is in prison. The truth is in the record. Jennifer's children know who she was. And the thousands of women who watched this story unfold and recognized something of their own experience in Jennifer's. They are still here. They are paying attention. They are telling each other the signs. That matters. It has to matter. So I want to ask you directly, in the comments below, do you think the system did enough to protect Jennifer Calloway? What should have happened differently? I read every single comment on this channel, and I genuinely want to know what you think. This is not a rhetorical question. It is the question. And if this story moved you, if it made you feel something, if it made you think, please share it. Not for the numbers. Because Jennifer's story deserves to be heard. Because every time someone watches this and thinks harder about the warning signs around them, about the women in their lives who might be carrying fear they haven't named out loud, that is Jennifer's story doing what she always wanted her. Words to do. And next time we are covering a case where a woman disappeared, where the investigation was officially closed, where the family was told to grieve and move on, and then a single photograph taken at a roadside gas station 800 miles away changed. Everything. You will not want to miss it. Subscribe. We will see you then.